forget how horses don't doubt.
This is former World Wrestling Federation superstar Duke the Dumpster Droese, and I just had an amazing interview with my good friend Keith Andrew, and I encourage you to watch and listen and take part in his great show in the future. It's time to take out the trash.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am your host, Keith Andrew, and welcome to the holiday edition of the Keith Andrew Network. That's right, the whole month of December, maybe January, depends on my mood, but for the whole month of December is a Christmas theme, so you get to dress up, show your holiday spirit. Today, I'm here with WWF Hall of Famer and WWE Hall of Famer, Duke the Dumpster Droese. It's a real honor and privilege having me as a guest, and I just want to say thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on the show. I should say, though, quickly, I want to correct, I am not a WWE Hall of Famer quite yet. Maybe not until they have the gimmick wing of the Hall of Fame, perhaps in the WWE. But I'm looking forward to that day someday, maybe coming. We shall see. But I do appreciate the accolades, and I appreciate the invitation to your show.
No, absolutely. And you are a Hall of Famer, number one. And I was debating, should I call you a Hall of Famer or should I just call you by a different name? I'm like, you know what? I think I should take my hat off to you because you deserved it for everything that you accomplished in your life.
Well, I absolutely am. I appreciate you saying that. If anything, I am in the Trash Man's Hall of Fame, that's for sure. But yes, I have been through trials and tribulations and learned a lot of lessons along the way, and it's been a great path, and I'm just happy to be here. Or many of us always say, I'm happy to be anywhere today. And again, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you saying all the nice things.
No, absolutely. And it's funny to mention that because I have a garbage can here. And hang on. So it's there. I have a garbage can, like your gimmick. And for people who want to say enough is Trump, we have a garbage with his name on it. I know.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I've had enough of politics. I'll tell you, just in general, for sure. So all of it can go in the garbage at this point. The way that, things have been lately with my stance is the negativity has to go. Everybody turning against each other and being negative. I looked at coronavirus, and I know we don't necessarily want to go off on this tangent, but I looked at the coronavirus and the things happening in 2020 as potentially an opportunity for this country to come together, like they did in 9/11 or like they did during natural disasters such as Hurricane Katrina and others. But for some reason, this time it was different. And there's been a lot of separation and people turning against each other because of political beliefs and other things. And it's just really unfortunate. And a lot of what I try to talk about on my podcast and with the people I work with is just being positive and encouraging other people instead of being negative and trying to beat people down and break them down and point out their flaws. That's just not a way to go, I think.
No, I agree with you 100%. And one thing I do want to point out is it's free, uncensored, freedom of speech, self-expression. You can say anything you want, talk about anything you want, PG-13. And one thing I will ask is not use the F word that much, but besides that, you can say whatever you want. It's uncensored. And for people who want to know what my talk show is about, before I answer your question, is whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities. To never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you want to be. It's prove to them you can still amount to something. So hashtag break the labels. And not to talk about politics, but if that's what you want to talk about, you're more than welcome to. But you're right. With 2020, there's over 2,000 people dead. You can't just sweep that underneath the carpet and say, oh, we will learn. That is a wake-up call. It doesn't matter what's all the bullshit and the drama. People need to wake up, come together, work together. I give you an example I'm talking about. As you mentioned, September 11th, people came together. Hurricane Sandy and Hurricane Katrina, people came together. Why does politics have to be so different? Not to stir up the fire or anything, but I do want to know how you feel. Nancy Pelosi is a freaking idiot because there's people that need the money, period. There's people that need the money. Yeah. And the assholes in government say, have a nice Thanksgiving or have a nice holiday. So what about the people that need it?
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. And it's been very difficult for a lot of people. A lot of people are out there struggling financially right now. A lot of businesses, especially small businesses, are closing right now because of the issues in this country. And something needs to be done. And this is an opportunity for the leaders to be leaders and truly be leaders and take action and show that they care about the people in this country. But it doesn't seem to be what they're doing. They're more worried about fighting each other, and fighting over things, and instead of taking care of the citizens of the United States. So yeah, I agree with everything you're saying, and it's unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. And even with all that negativity going on, I try to keep myself and the people around me in a positive space. I try not to dwell off too much in the negativity because it just drags you down, especially when it's something that you maybe don't necessarily have control over in your life. And I'm not talking about just politics. I mean, I'm talking about in your personal life. If there's things going on that you have certain feelings, bad feelings about, but it's something you have no control over, you've got to be very careful not to get caught up in negative feelings. And so I just try to push that negativity out. I try not to live in that space. I certainly try not to watch the news too much because it's just ridiculous. And, it's just unfortunate that people can't come together in a better fashion, and they can't take better care of the people of the country. And because again, it's the holiday season, like you said, and people are struggling, unfortunately.
Absolutely. What was the joke about Fox News? The only channel to scare old white people?
Yeah, Fox News. I mean, any of those news stations, really, it's just absurd. We've, if anything that we've learned in 2020, I think one of the things we have learned is that the media has become about selling their time and selling their shows and selling their stations more so than speaking the truth, unfortunately. And I'm saying across the board, I'm not cherry picking any particular networks. I just think in general, and I think it's amplified a lot by social media and some of the things that happen there with rumors and things like that turn into fact all of a sudden, somehow, some strange way, with all these quasi news outlets on social media and the internet. So you just got to be very careful and take everything you see, hear, or read with a major grain of salt, and not necessarily don't believe the hype, as they say.
No, I agree with you. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about, I want to know the beginning, middle, and end. How did you get the chance to work for the World Wrestling Federation? What was the first day? What was the process like?
Well, I was working early in my career. I was working down in Florida. I was going to college at the University of Miami, and I was wrestling on the independents whenever I could find. There wasn't, right before coronavirus, the independent scene all over this country was great, amazing. It wasn't like that in the 80s and the early 90s. So it was once a month, once every 2 weeks, you'd catch a show to work on or something. And down in Florida, I was working as much as I could. But early on, I decided I knew I needed to develop a character of some sort. And that's when I came up with the Garbage Man character, the Garbage Man Rocco Gibraltar. I wrestled down in Florida for quite a while. And when I finished college, I I put together a promotional package with a resume and pictures and a promo tape and everything. And I was going to travel the country. But what ended up happening is I found out right before I was getting ready to leave that Vince McMahon was at a convention in Miami at the Miami Beach Convention Center called the NatP Convention for TV executives. And I basically found a friend who was a local TV executive in Miami and got his credentials. And I walked in and walked right up to Vince McMahon and introduced myself and gave him a promotional package. So I made about 30 of these packages. I handed out 2 of them. I handed one to George the Animal Steele at a house show, and I handed one to Vince McMahon, and that was it. And that's all I had to do. I didn't have to drive the country, because then they called me about a week later. J.J. Dillon was the head of talent relations at the time, and they called me and set me up for a tryout at a TV taping up in Pennsylvania. And I had the tryout. Everything went well, and they hired me. I worked for them for about 2.5 years. It was a different world up there. I loved it. I loved most of it. But a lot of it I didn't like, the politics and stuff like that. And there was a lot that I didn't understand about that level of the business at the time. I just thought you went out there and wrestled and showed what you could do, and people loved it, and you got a good paycheck, and you got to do what you love to do, but it didn't quite work that simple. So after that 2.5 years, I became disillusioned with it, and I was ready to go. I had some good angles when I worked there. I worked Jerry the King Lawler, and one everybody always talks about is with Triple H. But during that Triple H feud, I got hurt. I hurt my back falling out of the ring, and that's when I started to use painkillers and stuff. And that's what became a mess, because then I became very erratic, and I just wasn't in my right frame of mind. But I wanted to keep working because I wanted to get to that pay-per-view. Back in those days, if you got hurt, you didn't tell anybody, because if you did, they took you off the road and somebody else got your spot. So that was the unwritten rule. Anyway, long story short, I pushed my way through that. But by the end of it, I was just a mental and physical mess. And it wasn't too much longer that I ended up leaving. They said I had just signed a new contract. And shortly after that, they told me I could just go ahead on home. And I went home, and things got worse with the injury and using the drugs, and things got bad. There was, I call it the dark ages. It was a bad period of time. And, it took a couple of rehabs and a couple felony arrests to finally knock some sense into me. And it was 2013, October 2nd, 2013 was the last day I ever used drugs or alcohol. And now I work in the court system. I work with people that are trying to change their lives and quit being hooked on drugs and alcohol, quit going in and out of jails and prison. They're trying to make a change. And I work for a very strict drug court program where we supervise and watch every move they make. We make them get jobs and become productive citizens again, and we kind of teach them the tools they need to live a positive life without the use of drugs and alcohol. And I think this is where I'm supposed to be now. That's what my podcast is about, Road to Recovery. It all kind of works together now. And I think I've come full circle. And I think this is where I'm supposed to be. So I hope that answers your question about the beginning, middle, and the end of the WWF career.
No, absolutely.
Right.
One question I do want to ask, and I got to take a commercial break, is do you think, back in the day, everyone did drugs, not to mention throw names, but you probably know a lot of people who did it.
Quite a few, yeah.
It's up to you if you want to mention the names, but do you think that in today's wrestling, things change for the better, or do you think sometimes they change for the worse?
I think they've changed for the better in a lot of ways, because I think at one point, finally, Vince McMahon realized there was a problem. It was not his fault. Let me be very clear in saying that. People that the wrestlers that used drugs and that died from it, they made their own choices. I could have very easily been one of the people that died. Thankfully, I'm not. But it wasn't somehow Vince McMahon's fault that people were using drugs. It was just something that a lot of people did to get by, because especially in those days, it was such a rough lifestyle. Living on the road and beating your body to death on a nightly basis. I always tell people being a professional wrestler is like being in a car accident every night of the week. And that's very true. I have the x-rays and the MRIs to prove it. But that's how people fall into that trap. They start to take some painkillers and they drink at the bar. They have to take something to sleep because we have a very limited space where we can sleep. And then we got to get up and jump on a plane in the wee hours of the morning and fly to a different country. And it's such a hectic, ridiculous schedule, or it was then, that guys tried to take shortcuts and take drugs. And unfortunately, a lot of those guys are no longer with us. But I think Vince realized and he recognized there was a problem. And he instituted the wellness program where he started offering free rehab to anybody that was ever under contract to him. And I think that was a very good thing for him and a very important thing for them to do. Since they've done that, I believe that their wellness program standards are a bit stricter. I don't think you can be in that program doing a bunch of drugs. You certainly cannot do illegal drugs. I don't think you can take a lot of painkillers and stuff like that. But people have insurance now. They have doctors, and we didn't have any of that stuff. They got doctors backstage that help you and fix you and work on you. And we didn't have any of that stuff. It was still a mom and pop operation, so to speak. It owned solely by the McMahon family back then. Now it's this big corporate juggernaut. And I'm sure they have a lot of things in place to take care of their talent better. So I don't think it's anywhere near what it was back in. As Stone Cold Steve Austin says, those were the Wild West days in wrestling and in the WWF. And there's a lot of truth to that. There was a lot of craziness going on, but unfortunately, a lot of people lost their lives because of it. And like I said about me personally, I'm just very fortunate that I wasn't one of them, because I very easily could have been.
No, absolutely. I said we're going to take a commercial break, but let's just keep this conversation going. The other question is, there are so many rumors of people taking drugs. Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Scott Hall, Snake Roberts is a perfect example. He was an alcoholic. Luckily, he got his wife around, but unfortunately, I don't know if you heard, but he's dealing with a lot of health problems.
Yeah, I think a lot of wrestlers that did go down that path, the human body can only take so much. And we did a lot of crazy things in our 20s and 30s that are coming back to, we're having to pay for them now in our 50s and 60s. That's why you see a lot of wrestlers not living past their early 60s, because of a lot of the things that they were doing early in life. And it's unfortunate. Unfortunately, you got to pay the piper at some point. And, honestly, sometimes I'll read a news story about another one of the brothers that has passed away, and I'll say to myself, how am I still here with all the crazy things I've done? But I try to live each day in a positive fashion, like I said at the start of your show, and I try to be as healthy as I can now. And I certainly don't do drugs or drink alcohol anymore, and don't put all the poison in my body anymore, because this old body certainly can't take it. There's no way. But yeah, a lot of those guys you mentioned had issues, and it was very publicly known. And they, in each of their ways, they found their way out of it for the most part. I think maybe some of them have fallen back. That's the nature of the beast with addiction. It's difficult, and there's a lot of relapse that happens. A lot of times people fall back into it, and it's unfortunate and it's sad. I just try to encourage people to get help when they are struggling with it, because I wouldn't wish that lifestyle on my worst enemy. And, I just hope any of the guys, wrestlers or otherwise, out there that are struggling right now with substance abuse issues and alcohol, they get help. You got to kind of humble yourself and ask for help. And I hope that Jake's okay. I saw him we did a show together probably last year sometime. And yeah, he looked kind of rough, but he wasn't on drugs or anything. I can tell you that, because I know what Jake used to look like when he was on drugs, and he was not. But he's just kind of getting old, and we're all getting old, But it was good to see him, because we worked briefly together in the WWF, and I hope he's doing well, and I hope he's healthy.
No, absolutely. Now, the last one I want to ask you, it's what were some of your favorite memories from working in the WWF? And do you still keep in contact with anyone?
Some of my favorite memories, it was interesting. You first start in that company and you're wide-eyed and, you're looking around, and I was in this locker room. All of a sudden, I went from working the independents in Florida to being in the locker room with all these wrestlers that I watched as a kid, or when I was coming up through the ranks in professional wrestling myself, that I used to idolize. And it was kind of a surreal moment to be in that locker room with all these guys. And they were all very accepting. They made me one of their own right away. And it was fun. I always enjoyed, even if you didn't get along with certain people professionally, we all worked together and tried to take care of each other for the most part. You certainly tried to protect each other in the ring and keep people from getting injured. But just in general, in the back, it was like a brotherhood. That's why everybody calls each other brother. It was like a brotherhood. There was camaraderie. We had a great time. We always cut up, made each other laugh. We made the road as bearable as we could for each other. And that's something I always cherished. And that was something I missed when I left wrestling, was that the friendship with guys like that. These days, I stay in touch with quite a few guys, especially on social media. I've told some stories about me and Stone Cold, and we talk from time to time. And we had some great road stories. Guys like I used to really like Savio Vega. He was a trip. People on social media I'm friends with now. I talk to Barry Horowitz now. Typhoon, Fred Ottman, I talk to him sometimes. Henry Godwin, the hog farmer, sometimes I'll talk to him. I think for those reasons, social media like Facebook and others have become a great thing for not just wrestlers to kind of come back in contact with each other, but people in general to rekindle relationships with friends and family. But yeah, because the wrestling business is such a fickle business. You work alongside somebody for 10 or 20 years going up and down the roads together, and then one of you leaves and you don't talk to each other again. At least that's the way it was for a long time, especially back in the day when I worked, when there was no internet and no cell phones. People really didn't stay in touch very much. So now all of these guys that used to work together back in the day have this medium to get back in touch with each other. And I think it's an awesome thing. And I over the last few years, I've come back in contact with a lot of these guys that I used to work with and that I still consider my friends. So, yeah.
No, absolutely. Now, it's the last 3 minutes. I'm going to pass it over to you. But the last thing I want to ask you is 2 questions in one. One, have you ever worked with people with disabilities? And based on everything you know and seen in my work, do you think I would fit in the professional wrestling world?
Yes to both of those questions. Yes, I've worked with people with disabilities. I actually grew up with learning disabilities early in life. I was ADHD before they called it that. Now I'm talking the 1970s. They just called it hyperactivity. I had to go to several different schools because I had trouble learning. I didn't learn basic reading until the 4th grade. But I was a special education teacher for about 10 years here in Tennessee. Before I unfortunately relapsed on drugs again, and that's when I got in all the trouble and ended up going to work for the courts. But before that, yeah, I was a special education teacher, and I was really good at it. I was one of the best here in my county, that's for sure. My principals always made sure to tell me that. I was a very good reading and math teacher. But the reason I wanted to do that was because I had so much difficulty growing up and learning. And I wanted to give kids what I didn't have access to in the 70s and 80s when I was coming up through school. So yes, I have worked with folks with disabilities of different sorts. And yeah, brother, I think you're doing a great thing here, man. This is a great show. It's a very professional setup. You know what you're doing. You've got great guests, and just keep plugging away and keep improving. Like I tell the people, my friends and the people that I work with, man, keep moving forward, keep improving what you're trying to do, making what you do better, making your product better and more accessible to other people, and you'll just keep growing. And I see great things for you in the future.
No, absolutely. Now, the last question I want to ask you is, we're going over limit, but I will give you an extra full minute. Actually, make that 2 minutes. So we're going over the limit, but I'll give you an extra 2 minutes. When I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what was your honest first reaction? What made you say yes? How do you feel now, and what do you recommend it to everyone you know?
Whenever somebody asks me to do an interview, I am always very open-minded. I didn't see anything in terms of disabilities or anything like that coming into the picture. I just, I could tell by your interactions and your messages that you were very professional. And, you know, I'm willing to work with a lot of people, especially though, if you present yourself in a very professional manner. And that's what you did, and that's why I wanted to work with you. And I would recommend anybody come on this show. It's a great show. And like I said, man, you only got great things to come for you in this show. So just keep doing what you're doing, brother.
No, absolutely. I really appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions for you off the air. But wrapping up, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest. And I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
I'm Jenny Fine.
Hi, it's Mimi Chen.
Hi, my name is Ellen George.
It's Shauna Toth.
Hey guys, I'm Anastasia Edwards.
Hi, this is Jackie Nunez.
Hi, I'm Millie Rose Fair.
Hey guys, I'm Alexandria Denise, and you're watching Keith Andrews Show. He's doing a terrific job. Make sure you like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more awesomeness.